And Wolfgang, your turn.
Why am I the only guy in this beautiful room who is wearing a kidult piece of clothes? You know, legible clothing is never okay. Either I should do the tie thing, or I should have this academic shabby chic, you know, with a tweedy or worn sweaters and so on. So what's with this kidultism? This is not, as Mariana suggested, that about somebody who helps a doctor in a hospital. But it is actually the famous Estonian development economist, Reinert, one of the three fathers of classical development economics, who was an Estonian and after whom the Reinert Department of Innovation and Governance, where I'm from, and which Reinert brought to itself and actually renamed, come from. Yeah? So this is a tribute to Erik, because not only is this his primary academic appointment and not the reindeer economics, but also because we would not have named this department without Erik, because it was Erik who actually in Estonia rediscovered this Nordic guy who tried to be neoclassical and yet all the time was hurt by thinking too hard about real economic problems and therefore having to say, yeah, well, you know, I need that for the publications, but now let's deal with the real stuff. And that, of course, brings us to the other aspect of Erik that I wanted to emphasize this evening, and you'll see it's actually a beautiful bridge between who went before me and who comes after me, and that is the book. Yeah, you see even these kind of vaguely German colors that the IPP Coms did in here. I mean, you may remember it from the time when Germany used to be a soccer nation. That was a while ago. The older ones of you remember. German Historical School. This is one of these other canon economics. That means an entire different body of how to also theoretically look at economic development that have been forgotten, and also partially with the argument that, well, anything that is good is preserved in today's mainstream economics, and the answer to that is no, it is not. The only question is whether this forgetting is stupid or evil. One of the two. That means, is it ignored on purpose or because people just don't get it? Now, when I wrote my essay in the volume on alternative development economics, which I think you two and Jayati Ghosh edited, on the contribution of the German Historical School to development economics, this is based on work of mine where I really went to all the originals, all the different people in Germany who contributed to that, the reflections in the secondary work, and you know, obviously that's not particularly special. What is special is that I wrote this essay at Erik's place, at Erik's library, and I did not have to order a single book or essay by interlibrary loan. Because, and that is not a joke, this is one of the, if not the best privately held collections on that field. Erik owns the tools of production. He has assembled them with the fruits of his labor in that company, which was the leading European company when he sold it in Europe at that time. Let's not forget that. Yeah? So that is another aspect that I think is interesting. But what could be as boring as German historical economics? Haven't we all read in all kinds of bad econ histories that these elephantine histories and assemblies of things are so incredibly irrelevant? Well, how many countries do we have in the OECD that are actually not social market economies? Where does the social market economy as an idea, as a concept, as a policy comes from? That is a function of the German Historical School, as Erik has shown again and again. Can we ever truly understand what Professor Schumpeter meant with innovation? Not as a little definition thing, but of what it's truly supposed to do in human existence. Why do we really need this so much? What happens if you don't innovate? We know in one of Erik's main essays that he actually wrote with Hugo Reinert, who should be here somewhere, up there, so father-son co-production, on how actually Schumpeter borrowed this. This is a Nietzschean notion, but Schumpeter actually didn't get it from Nietzsche, but he got it from a German historical school economist by the name of Werner Sombart, and we did not know that before, and how that actually works. And Sombart gives a specific spin to the Nietzschean version of creative destruction, and it's a really crucial insight. This is not historical, this is functional. And finally, if I see our Norwegian friends here, a little anecdote, I'm not even sure whether I should tell that, but one of the Leankollen conferences that we had, one of the first, somebody asked one of these seriously prosperous Norwegians who were funding this, he said, well, but with your industry association in the parliament, you're always talking about neoliberal economics, but then you're funding this stuff here. And the guy laughed and said, yeah, in the parliament what we argue is because it's good for us, and we are funding this to find out how it's really working. And that, I think, is a crucial point here. It goes back to this policy and theory debate that we have. But there is three things that I want to say that I have learned or have linked from the German historical school for the meanings for today, for economics today, also from Erik's work, and that's why you should read this book. Method is never neutral. Do not think you can be progressive if you use a theory that is primarily utilized to distract people from what really matters. Yeah? That is not a conspiracy theory. If you buy the mainstream method, you will never talk about what really matters. That is the trick here, and that is why certain people fund this kind of economics. And that partially, by the way, is the story of why 2008 didn't bring down mainstream economics, because of that. Second, state and economy naturally belong together. To divide them is artificial. Of course you need state policy in order to manage the economy, but they were never separate. That is one of the basic assumptions of the German historical school, that they do belong together, that economic policy is always needed. And the third, that came through, I think, all of these points here. Erik referred to this rectoral speech of Gustav von Schmoller, the greatest leader of the Middle German historical school, so-called younger historical school. This is this big lecture that Schmoller, this Geheimrat type with a big beard and dominating imperial German economy at its best in the time before it switched in a more problematic way. And Schmoller said, well, we are kind of winning. It was the last time that somebody like that said that. But he emphasizes in this speech and in his main work all the time a thing that is at the core of Erik's thinking, and that is that the main subject of economics is the human person. It's not about scarce goods or anything else you might want to construct. And any modeling and any abstraction that you don't tie down to the actual human problems that we have, this is the Peru story, right? That is something that is so important. At the heart, at the core of Erik's economics is a direct tying of economics to the plight of the human person and of those who do not have the oodles of money to have a fun life, but who do need a serious form of economics for them to live a decent life. That is the basis. Whatever you can change in this direction is really worth all your life. And yes, you're right, Erik has been, well, he hasn't even been trying to be a mainstream economist, but he has, career-wise, not been at the core of things. That is true. But on the policy level, at least, hasn't world history caught up with Erik? Aren't we here in the Gustav Tuck auditorium with all of these people? Isn't, in a very profound way, the IAPP, isn't Mariana's work the ultimate success of that kind of policy approach? Isn't that moving into the mainstream? Isn't the people in the OECD saying, yeah, we believe that all the time? Doesn't that mean that at least policy-wise, if not theory-wise, we are actually getting somewhere? And isn't that something great to say on a 70th birthday of such a great scholar and such a great humanist as Erik Reinert? Thank you.